So when I was preparing this talk, I realized something important. Did you notice that you spend 2/3 of your life in your home? That's 14 hours a day. Let me break it down for you. 8 hours of sleep, a couple of hours in the morning when you wake up, have breakfast with your family, a couple of hours to wrap up the day, have dinner, maybe a couple of hours more watching a movie or browsing the internet. And that's only on a weekday. So you see, we should not neglect our homes. During the COVID pandemic, we all realized how important it is to be surrounded with a well-designed home.
Now we have Mr. Antoine Maynard, the founder of Bloom Architecture, who will be presenting his project titled Small House. Let's give him a big warm welcome.
So when I was preparing this talk, I realized something important. Did you notice that you spend 2/3 of your life in your home? That's 14 hours a day. Let me break it down for you. 8 hours of sleep, a couple of hours in the morning when you wake up, have breakfast with your family, a couple of hours to wrap up the day, have dinner, maybe a couple of hours more watching a movie or browsing the internet. And that's only on a weekday. So you see, we should not neglect our homes. During the COVID pandemic, we all realized how important it is to be surrounded with a well-designed home. Your home should be the place for which you have the most affection in the world. It's a place where being with your family should feel right, but also being alone should feel right. It is intimate. Today, I would like to tell you a little bit about our key ingredients into designing homes rather than houses. It is the architecture of trust that we built between the architect and the homeowner. I am the founder of Bloom, and I founded Bloom a decade ago with a very ambitious mission. I wanted to improve our built surrounding, and I wanted our building to be the stage for the next generation in Cambodia. For this reason, it is very easy for us to feel invested when we design public buildings, such as a school or an hospital, but it is rather challenging when we have to design for one person, one particular client that has the final say on everything. We feel vulnerable. It's quite stressful. It feels like a game of pull and pull. And at the end, we're always gonna lose. The client can pull the rope at any time. Fortunately, when we invest commitment, dedication, we manage to create empathy. Empathy is the key to design a home that feels personal. Many great architects have started their career with a home as a training ground. It was for people that they cared for and for people who cared for them. These are Le Corbusier's parents in front of the Villa Udom. This is the second home that the most influential architect of the 20th century designed for them. And it is widely recognized nowadays as a mock-up for what we call modern architecture. When Le Corbusier was designing it, he had these words: home is the temple of the family. But let me tell you an interesting story. 10 years earlier, Le Corbusier built the first home for his parents. And at the time, he was a very young and ambitious architect. He wanted to prove what he was capable of, And his ambition led him to design something that would be too big, a palace that would not be able to be used by his parents. And eventually, he completely ruined his family. So the money that was used to build the Villa Le Lac is actually the money they could salvage from bankruptcy. My point here is imagine the unconditional trust between Le Corbusier's parents, Georges-Édouard and Marie here, and for their son. The funny part is that it's not that they thought that the guy was a genius. They actually pity him and they wanted to help their struggling architect son that was having a hard time starting his career. A home was also a training ground for myself, and my first project was in 2014 when my parents also decided to renovate a house in Compot. Fortunately, I didn't ruin them. At the time, I was a young architect working in Switzerland, and I was working for my favorite studio, Herzog de Meuron, and I was in a search for a new challenge. When you're working on landmarks all around the world, and you're surrounded with talents from all around the world, what's the next step? And I felt it needed to be a personal challenge. So when I saw this opportunity to take a leap here, come to Compot, and try to help my parents with their will of taking their retirements in Cambodia, I seized the opportunity. It was a big challenge, and it took me really out of my comfort zone, especially when I arrived to Cambodia, and I started to think, what can I do here with this house? So the first thing I did was I went to see some local contractor and asked for advice. And they told me, do you understand that this house is 100 years old? It is our heritage. On that I agree. Do you realize how old it is? It is very dangerous. I was like, okay, yeah, that's true as well. I'm a bit stressed about that. So what you need to do is to demolish it and to rebuild it exactly the same. That got me a little bit puzzled. I'm also amazed by the beauty of this building. And I thought we should probably preserve it because it's an artifact of the past. But we should also somehow breathe in a new life to this building. We should give it a new reason to be. And for that reason, I took a lot of time to study adaptive reuse, which is a new form of architecture where instead of modifying a building to fit a certain use, we modify the use to fit the building. I wonder, when I was looking at the building, this is a typical typology from Southeast Asia. It's called the Chinese shop house. They all have an air well right at the center. But what if that air well could be something else? What if it could be a garden? What if it could be the heart of the house? What if it could connect all the spaces within this house? What if all the rooms could have a view to the outside, but also a view to the inside? And that's how we ended up with this hybrid between heritage elements that was salvaged and contemporary items that are blending together. In order to achieve a coherent result, the key was to work with craftsmen. So the craft is really what allows the new and the old to blend seamlessly. For example, you can see here the work with the wood. So the wood within the house was in quite bad shape, started to be eaten by termites in some parts. So we managed to salvage some of it, and we found this technique that is using lime, actually somehow bleach the wood, which gives it a certain patina and protects it better from the attacks from bugs. And this is really this patina that you can see that allows to tell a coherent story within the house. this staircase here was built with a metal worker that had his shop 150 meters away from the site. And instead of trying to push him to try to fit our design, we adapted the design to its capacity. At the end, I'm talking about this project because this is what gave me confidence. What I could see that I had the trust of workers, I had the trust of my parents, of course, and I have the trust of people of Compot. And somehow, this project really renewed my sense of purpose. I realized my knowledge that I acquired from working in fancy companies in Europe is actually quite valuable here. And maybe there's a way that I could transfer it to the next generation. One of the things that I realized during this project is the importance of architecture to be anchored to a territory. It came to me because of the Compot paper, which is one of the only products that have international recognition. It's the only paper in the world that has international recognition. So it is recognized that this specific product is the product of a soil, of techniques from the farmers, and of the people of Compot. And I thought to myself, how can we translate that into architecture? And I found 4 elements that we always try to develop differently in each project. The first one is the history. There's always different history, whether you're in Compot or in Phnom Penh. The second one is the climate. The climate, all of Cambodia is a tropical climate. But there is very different climate when you are in Sihanoukville, on the seaside, or if you are in a Bonol Kiri, with a little bit of elevation. The materials, we try to use as much as possible local materials, because this is a way that we can keep the investment in construction within Cambodia and use it to develop the skills of the workers. And what I find out is there's actually many different regions with many different materials in Cambodia. And finally, the nature. Depending on the elevation of the land, you will have different type of trees, different type of nature. So, all in all, what I'm trying to tell you is that a building in colonial Compot will be very different than a building in the urban center of Phnom Penh. So, fast forward a little bit. This is 2017. So at that time, this is the 5th project from the office. And the story of it is I'm introduced to a client. She's a Cambodian returnee from the US. And she tells me about her land that she just acquired, that is at the end of a very narrow alleyway, 90 centimeter wide and 23 meter long, that is right next to the Royal Palace. And that got me interested. So I went to see the site, and she explained to me the project. It's so when you enter that alleyway and you go really deep, you enter inside of one of the typical residential blocks from Phnom Penh, and you arrive into this sort of a village full of shacks. And somehow it's really unexpected because as I told you, you're right in the dense prime part of the city. And she had managed to buy a land that was 5 by 6 meter. And she had a budget of 80,000 USD. So I thought to myself, okay, this is not a project that is probably commercially viable. But on the other hand, between you and I was really jealous of that project. And I thought, if it was me, I would want to have a house there. So I took on the project, and we designed it, and everything was going well. Perfect client, amazing. The design goes well. Then just right when we were about to start the construction, she tells me, I managed to buy the land next to it, and I would like to extend my house from 1 meter. My first reaction, of course, was that we have to redesign everything for this 1 meter. my second reaction was, but what do you do with the rest of the land next to it? Because why don't we build together? You give me the land, we arrange ourselves about the project, and somehow my client became my neighbor. Just so, to be clear, that's not an advice for the younger generation. So you see now, what used to be like one small house is now a twin house. And interestingly, 1 year later, another owner passed by the house and asked me, I want to do the same thing with the land just behind. So we ended up with 3 small houses. And then another year later, another owner dropped by, same thing. I want the same house with an existing shop house. I want to convert it into the same. It's interesting how you start with a project and you never know where it ends. It's really a continuous learning. What I learned there is like maybe, I think for certain people, this is really an alternative between buying an apartment in a condominium or buying a house in a boree that allows you to stay within the city center. So what is really the particularity of those houses is they are fully covered with cement brace block. As I've told you earlier, it's really a wish of the office to use as much as possible local materials. So all these brace blocks, they are built from a factory on the National 6. Very nice guy that is also doing all our cement tiles. And you can see the cement block. We had already used them and already worked with this person before for this specific project here, the factory. But at the time, we were using it just for decorative purpose. And then we thought, can we multiply the function of that block? Can we use it as a protection from the climate? Can we use it to protect from the sun? Can we use it to create intimacy? Because when you are working with such a small piece of land, you have very strong views from your neighbor. So we needed to create some sort of intimacy. So the pattern is a customized pattern that we have developed in-house. And you can see here the effect on the facade. So actually there's 3 types of opening. You have some that are completely hidden behind the brace block, some that are just coming out a little bit, and there is this kind of like hero window that is sticking out and coming very close to a tree that happened to be there. So it's really playing with the conditions that exist. This picture is a bit wrong. To be honest, my neighbor never goes there. It's mostly your dog. And here, you can see, depending on which orientation we have. So the previous one was facing west, which is not ideal for the window, but because we were using the shade of the tree, it allowed to protect from the sun. But here on the east, for example, we are using external blinds. And when we are on the south, we are using a balcony. So we are creating a buffer space between the facade and the brace blocks. Last element of the brace block is the color. So the color, we wanted something that somehow speaks of the laterite roads that we see in Siem Reap, but also something that contrasts with the vegetation. Because what we find out is those brace blocks are a perfect substrate for vegetation and for tropical monsteras and so on. And actually, it's something that we have developed over time. Architecture as a substrate for living. And what we find out is that it does not only apply to vegetation, it also applies to animals that are starting to make use of these cavities that you have within the blocks. And generally, it's actually quite nice animals. We have like bees, birds, squirrels, hornbills. We also have some less good ones like monkeys during the COVID. But yeah, overall, it's really, as soon as you enter the block, it really creates this green heaven with this full-on biodiversity. And I will tell you a little bit more about how the inside are made. So, as you could see from outside, you don't see much of the house. It's a bit like, it has a bit of a bunker feeling, but this is something that we wanted to actually create protection. Nowadays, there's a lot of people entering this alley, so you need some sort of privacy. But the inside, we want it as bright as possible and as functional as possible. Let's make it simple. The plans, it's a staircase, a back of house space that serves for a kitchen or a WC, and then a front of house space that is the living area. Then it's a very compact typology, and we have one function per floor. And finally, we break the scale by using the breeze block only on the first 2 levels and maximizing the greenery so that we can really create a green heaven from the outside. A close-up of the plan. So this is the ground floor. You can see the staircase that are creating this central core within the project, the kitchen that are attached to it, and in front the living room. I'm going to take you in. So you see this solidity from outside. It's very, it's actually quite harsh. And you have, but as soon as you enter, the blocks, they actually become like a filter. And it's very bright inside. And we multiply the amount of windows so that we can take light between the boundary wall and the wall of the house. Let me take you upstairs. So this is like 2 bedrooms, 1 kid bedroom and 1 bedroom, and we have like WCs next to attached to the staircase. So we have this very compact staircase. And as soon as we go up, like we play with a lot of different openings and a lot of different views. And you can see here, this is like, for example, when we cannot have the view, we still need ventilation. So we have this type of ventilation that are hidden behind the breeze blocks. And this is like the main floor where we have all the master bedrooms. So here, I will tell you a little bit more about the interiors. Although for me, I'm not very keen on interior design because I like my project to be essential. I think our homes, they are a canvas for living. So what I like is to create things that are quite muted, very essential. There's just a few accents of wood. But the idea is like people can really style it their own way, put artworks, put elements that are important to them so that they can showcase their identity within their home. Another point is all this fitted furniture. They are at the same time very functional, very cost efficient. It's all plywood. But also, there's something that we developed over projects. And for example, here, what you see is a bed. It actually doubles up as a storage. It's a console, so you can put your artwork behind. And it also has a bench at the front to tie up your laces. And it even has a USB charger. Another home, another style. You can see like the identity comes from, our idea is like we all have different life stories. And the way that we tell them is through the elements that we showcase in our houses. So that's why like our architecture is just a support for that. Here you can see how the vegetation breaks the scale of the building from outside, but also from inside act as a filter. So from inside, you have plenty of light, but you don't have any view coming in. And finally, the rooftop. So that's, the project went along so well with my nowadays neighbor that we decided to create a communal rooftop, because of course, like when you have a house that is 6 meters by 6 meters, you need space to receive people, and we decided that the rooftop will be the place to do that. There's very interesting view all around, because it's inside of the block. You have a lot of privacy. It's very quiet. It's really a change from the stressful everyday life of Phnom Penh. One day, we received a book coming from Singapore, and we opened the parcel, and we find out that the house was used as the cover page of Cube magazine, which is a magazine in Singapore of design, national edition. And somehow, of course, it makes you proud, but it was not the aim. Like as I told you before, like the project was really trying to answer constraints from the site, trying to answer the realities of the owners. But what I think happens is when you manage to do these two things, when you're doing private homes, somehow you create beautiful stories. And those beautiful stories, people are very keen to share them. So that's what I think happened here is like this picture really speaks about that. And then it had like a snowball effect where like all the different blogs, international blogs like Archdaily or DECUS started to showcase the house. And DECUS even chose it last year in the final 5 for their DECUS Awards for the best house internationally. Let's say my learnings over this career is that the beautiful stories that we can create with the homes, they are born out of the parallel between the architect and the homeowner. So every time you have to think about how you're going to tell a story. So for example, this is a house for 2 artists that have their studio inside that needs a place where they can be creative. It is somehow a tribute to creativity. And in terms of space, it's a garden and a gallery combined. This house here is a home for a family of factory owners that needs a place on their factory land, a little bit far of Phnom Penh, but they need a place where they can keep an eye on their everyday business, but they can also somehow release themselves, get some intimacy, and somehow get some relaxation time after a very busy day. Finally, this home here is a home for a big family. A big family that is all over the region. And they need a space where they can regroup together and celebrate the milestones in their lives. I think at the end, beautiful homes and beautiful stories are alike. They are authentic. They speak to us about our humanity, and they transform us. This all reminds me of a citation from Bjarke Ingels, where he compares architects with midwives. And what he says is, we are not designing buildings. We are assisting owners to build theirs. Because you have to do some reverse psychology here. You have to put yourself in the shoes of the owner. It is an act of transformation. For them, it's a milestone in their life. It is like having a child. There will be a before, and there will be an after. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Antoine, for that insightful, inspiring presentation on the Small House project.